Mangwana ni Malelepo for Kenyan Klekwas. Welcome to Africa. Good morning, your portal into Africa's potent stories. Today we bring you important developments across the continent, beginning with Malawi's Mutharika reclaiming the presidency after last week's election. In Seychelles, President Wavel Ramkalawan campaigns for a second term against Patrick Herminie, while Uganda confirms Yoweri, Museveni and Bobi wine as presidential candidates ahead of next year's vote. Zimbabwe's Mnangagwa reshuffles Zanu-PF leadership, sparking succession speculation. Finally, Kenyan engineer Joseph Nguthiru transforms invasive water hyacinth into eco-friendly solutions. Veteran Malawian journalist Karen Iron Msiska shares insights on Malawi's election from the Evening Review. This is Africa Good Morning. You are joined by Ashwin Betty, and we'll head into our top stories shortly.
Tourism is a TV show that explores various touristic destinations, providing viewers with in-depth coverage of locations, events, and experiences. The show presents detailed insights into destinations, cultural highlights, and travel tips to engage both local and international audiences.
Let's get into the top stories on Africa Good Morning. Mutharika is set to reclaim Malawi's presidency 5 years after a quarter annulled his previous victory. The 85-year-old, who governed from 2014 to 2020, defeated incumbent Lazarus Chakwera in last week's general election. Mutharika campaigned on the claim that life was better under his leadership, contrasting his rule with economic decline under Chakwera. A law professor by training, Mutharika had once built a career in academia before joining politics when his brother Bingu became president in 2004. Over time, he served as Minister of Justice, Education and Foreign Affairs before being elected president in 2014. His first tenure saw falling inflation but was marked by corruption scandals, food shortages and blackouts. In 2019, he controversially won re-election only for the Constitutional Court to overturn results, branding him the Tipex president. He lost the 2020 rerun to Chakwera despite announcing he would not contest again. He re-entered politics, citing calls from supporters. Though questions remain about his health, Malawians returned him to power, even in opposition strongholds, hoping for relief from poverty and hardship. Moving on. Voting has begun in Seychelles, where President Wavel Ramkalawan is seeking a second 5-year term while aiming to maintain his coalition's parliamentary majority. The island nation, Africa's wealthiest per capita, has rebounded strongly after COVID-19, with inflation below 2% and debt falling under IMF projections. Ramkalawan, a former Anglican priest, is promising stronger social protections, infrastructure projects, free school meals and neutrality in foreign affairs to attract investment. His rival, Patrick Herminie of United Seychelles, has centered his campaign on tackling rising living costs, corruption and drug abuse. Herminie, once charged with attempting a coup through witchcraft, allegations later dropped, criticizes the leasing of islands to foreign firms. Over 3 days, 73,000 voters will cast ballots for 8 presidential candidates and 125 contenders for the 35-seat National Assembly, with results expected Sunday. Other contenders include gospel singer Robert Momo, entrepreneur Marco Francis, and former tourism minister Alain St. Ange. Ramkalawan hopes his record of reforms, minimum wage increases, and infrastructure plans will secure a victory, while Herminie stresses lessons from his party's 43 years in power. In our next story, Uganda's Electoral Commission has confirmed President Yoweri Museveni as eligible to run in next year's election, positioning him for nearly half a century in power. Museveni, who is 81, first seized power in 1986 as a rebel leader. While praised for stabilizing Uganda as well as for driving growth, his rule is criticized for rights abuses, corruption and silencing opponents. Constitutional constitutional amendments have twice removed barriers, scrapping term and age limits to prolong his tenure. Museveni is expected to face opposition leader Bobi Wine, a 43-year-old musician turned politician who accuses him of rigging the 2021 election. Museveni has pledged that another term would focus on crime reduction, infrastructure development, healthcare and education. His government anticipates rapid economic growth once crude oil exports begin next year. Opponents, however, accuse him of using state security and patronage to sustain control, charges he denies. Uganda's military chief Muhoozi Kainerugaba, Museveni's son, recently admitted detaining an opposition activist, further fueling accusations of repression. Museveni's nomination marks the first to be cleared, with Wine's candidacy assessment also happening. And that's the story we're getting into. The Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine, whose real name is Robert Kyagulanyi, has been cleared to contest next year's election against President Yoweri Museveni. Wine, 43, first challenged Museveni in 2021 but rejected results, alleging fraud, intimidation and bribery. Declared a candidate in Kampala, he vowed to fight for better leadership, saying Uganda's problem is not wealth but governance. Museveni, 81, who has ruled since 1986, was approved a day earlier, and if successful, his tenure would reach nearly 50 years. Wine's National Unity Platform has repeatedly condemned kidnappings, torture, and politically motivated charges against its supporters. Museveni's government denies the allegations, insisting arrests follow legitimate suspicions. Wine has faced threats from Museveni's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, head of the military, who admitted holding an opposition figure in his basement known as the ghetto president, quote-unquote. Wine draws support from urban youth and the poor, saying he represents graduates without jobs and struggling farmers. His music career in Kampala's ghettos launched his popularity, now channeled into political opposition against Uganda's long-serving leader. We now move to Zimbabwe. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has announced a major reshuffle in Zanu-PF's Politburo, intensifying speculation about succession dynamics within Zimbabwe's ruling party. Party spokesperson Christopher Mutangwa said the move, executed under constitutional provisions, was aimed at strengthening internal structures. Key changes include the appointment of Jacob Francis Nzwidamilimo Mudenda as Secretary General, replacing Obert Moses Mpofu, who shifts to the Information Communication Technology portfolio. Patrick Anthony Chinamasa, formerly responsible for legal affairs, now serves as Treasurer General, while Ziyambi moves to head legal affairs. Mutsangwa stressed that the changes reflect commitment to party values and the permanent Zimbabwe revolution. Analysts note that redeployments and promotions signal consolidation of Mnangagwa's allies and could influence leadership contests. The reshuffle comes ahead of the party's People's Conference, a key event likely to shape succession. Observers say such appointments rarely remain administrative, but are part of maneuvers within a party that has dominated politics since independence in 1980. The reorganization underscores both Mnangagwa's authority and ongoing jockeying for influence among senior Zanu-PF figures. And in our last top story, on Lake Naivasha's shores, water hyacinth has devastated fisheries, blocked sunlight and damaged ecosystems. Yet Kenyan engineer Joseph Nguthiru has turned the invasive weed into an opportunity, founding Hyapack, a startup producing biodegradable alternatives to plastic. His company's breakthrough is seedling bags made with hyacinth, which decompose in soil, nourish crops and reduce plastic pollution. Our products feel and perform like plastic but decompose quickly, Nguthiru explains, noting that the innovation addresses both environmental and agricultural challenges. So far, his team has cleared over 20 acres of the weed from the lake. The work has earned Nguthiru the 2025 Young Champion of the Earth Award from the United Nations Environment Program. Hyacinth, described as the world's most invasive aquatic weed, disrupts irrigation, increases malaria severe risks and damages livelihoods. Higher packs eco-friendly solutions not only help restore the environment, but also create local jobs. Nguthiru's initiative demonstrates how innovation can turn destructive forces into sustainable growth, providing Kenya with new tools to fight plastic waste and environmental degradation. Those have been our top stories on Africa. Good morning. Just now we'll be heading to the weather, and after that we'll be bringing you an interview that I had last night on the Evening Review with Malawian veteran journalist and communication specialist Karen Iron Msiska about the recently concluded elections in Malawi. He himself is in Lilongwe. Stay with Africa. Good morning. Now, our top story for the last week has been the Malawian election, and Malawans have selected Peter Mutharika to lead. Now, on the Evening Review last night, I spoke to veteran Malawian journalist and communication specialist Karen Iron Msiska about the recently concluded elections in Malawi, just to get a little more detail on what's happening on the ground. Here is a snippet from that conversation. Betty. Now, last week, Malawans headed to the polls to, amongst other things, elect a president. And as we speak today, Malawans have made a decision, and they have chosen Peter Mutharika to take over from Lazarus Chakwera, who took over from Peter Mutharika. To get into this particular subject in depth, we are now joined by Mr. Karen Iron Msiska, a seasoned communication specialist with over 17 years experience spanning journalism, public relations, and behavior change communication. He is in Malawi. Mr. Msiska, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much, and thanks for considering me.
It's wonderful to have you on the Evening Review. Before we get into the set of questions, I understand you are in Lilongwe. What's the atmosphere been like in Malawi over the past week?
As soon as voting stopped or completed, there were incidents of some skirmishes, particularly between supporters of the outgoing president and his party, the Malawi Congress Party, against the supporters of the incoming president and his party, the Democratic Progressive Party. There were some incidences where people believed to be set by the ruling party, the outgoing ruling party rather, so to say, wanted to touch down a financial institution, a government financial institution, the National Economic Empowerment Fund. We haven't established the reasons yet, but security quickly called the situation. And so that was as soon as the voting completed, and it was actually on Wednesday last week. And then as it became clear that the incumbent president was losing, there were incidences where supporters of the Democratic Progressive Party of the incoming president caused some skirmishes in Blantyre, where it is deemed where it deems it as a stronghold. As a background, the Malawi Congress Party, that of President Lazarus Chakwera, is mostly based in the central region of Malawi, Lilongwe, and surrounding areas. And then the Democratic Progressive Party is predominantly in the southern region, where is Blantyre and surrounding districts. And then the northern region, Zuzu and surrounding districts, usually becomes a kingmaker in these elections. So back to the question, we've had some incidences, particularly yesterday and the day before yesterday, where starting with Zimbabwe, where someone was beaten up because he shouted a DPP slogan. And then yesterday we heard of some situations in Atlanta where after the outgoing president had conceded defeat, supporters of the incoming president started beating up those that had been known to be supporting the outgoing president. So those are the key issues that we've been hearing about since the run-up to the announcement of the results. But ever since the results were formally announced yesterday, we've had no clear indication where supporters might have come to a conflict. Actually, it was all celebrations last evening as soon as the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission declared Peter Mutharika victor in the last.
All right, sir. And I do think that certainly President Lazarus Chakwera's early conceding contributed, I imagine, to, quelling down some of the fires which were starting to sprout. And as we know in this region, post and pre-election violence is something that we always have to keep an eye on. Now, this was a resounding defeat for Lazarus Chakwera, a man who has had a political rivalry which has pretty much defined his entire political career with Mutharika. The last time Lazarus Chakwera got the best of Mutharika, of course, this was after the annulled election. But what do you think were the factors behind this resounding defeat?
As a background to the rivalry between the two, we have to go back to 2014. Lazarus Chakwera had abandoned his pastoral ministry to join politics, and he became president of the Malawi Congress Party. And the first election he contested against Mutharika in 2014. So it was Mutharika for Democratic Progressive Party, Chakwera for Malawi Congress Party, versus Joyce Banda, who was incumbent at that particular time. Joyce Banda came third in that election. So the contest was mainly between Peter Mutharika and Lazarus Chakwera. Then come 2019, Malawians went into that election with a lot of hate against Peter Mutharika. Things had gone really bad, that it really had to take an election that was poorly managed for him to be re-elected, and eventually that was nullified by the courts. So Malawians went back to the fresh presidential election in 2020, and at that time, I should believe and clearly point out here that Saulos Klaus Chilima, the late vice president, was the kingmaker in that election. In 2019, he pulled a good number of votes, 1,200,000 something. And then when he joined forces with Lazarus Chakwera in 2020, it was really a resounding victory for Lazarus Chakwera. Peter Mutharika was defeated. And then, as we headed to those elections, there were quite a number of promises to Malawians that Malawians accepted as really the benchmark for going into transformation for the country. Unfortunately, those promises were not fulfilled, and I really believe that is the reason why Lazarus Chakwera has been punished this way by way of being voted out this resounding. I will mention a few of those things. As he got into government, Lazarus Chakwera promised to significantly reduce the price of fertilizer. You might wish to know that Malawi has a peasant farmer base of around 85% of the population. So everyone depends on the fertilizer. And then come to govern, the fertilizer prices actually went significantly very high. And not everyone was happy with that one. And that should be one of the reasons Chakwera has been punished in this way. Then secondly, we failed to decide on very critical social issues. His government was famed with using middlemen to get a number of services for government. And his secretary to the president and cabinet was the one frequently mentioned in this case. Eventually, we ended up with very lean forex systems, and being a country that relies mostly on imports for most of these services, that meant the country was in trouble. Hospitals started feeling the pinch of not having critical medicine, and then there were persistent fuel shortages. And even the week that we are going to vote, the president came out and blamed someone from the national oil company that they were sabotaging his government. As a background, he had just signed an agreement with a number of East Asian countries to be supplying fuel products directly from government to government. But Malawians, we did not actually feel the benefit of that. We did not feel the benefit of that arrangement. Eventually, fuel shortages continued, and the person being mentioned as the architect of all these mishappenings is the same secretary to the president. And then the prices of maize, the staple for Malawi, it went really, really high. So almost every social aspect was going beyond the average Malawian. The cost of living had skyrocketed dramatically during his time, and all this was because he had failed to make the critical decisions. And eventually, when these things started going up, we couldn't even control the situation. So it was like the country was on autopilot, and then the things went going haywire, and the government seemed not to be in control of the situation. So that is, I believe, that is why even the former president, now incoming President Peter Mutharika, gathered the courage to say no.
Right.
Definitely, indeed win. Though he did campaign as widely as Chakwera campaigned, but the way he had garnered the votes across the country tells us that indeed things had really got bad, and Malawians have a lot of expectations from Mutharika himself.
All right. You know, that's sorry to cut in over there. You know, it's very interesting because a lot of Africans were surprised, particularly because as time goes on, African youth are getting a little bit tired of the older generation. You look at Botswana's voting, you look at Senegal, younger guys coming in. And there was some, element of surprise in realizing that Mutharika, who's already quite advanced in age, was being brought back. However, he is also credited during his tenure for some significant infrastructure upgrades in Malawi. So we can understand that Malawians were looking back at this man who actually had what they felt were tangible results, regardless of how it ended. And it seems like they felt like that's an opportunity to give him another chance. And at the same time, from Peter Mutharika's side, as much as he won, he did apparently beat a man that was beating himself. Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning with a little bit of a sprinkle of the evening review there. It's been a pleasure bringing you the show, not just today, but throughout the week. On Monday, we return with Mike Sichula as he delivers the news stories from Zambia. Of course, we'll still be covering stories from broader Africa. But let's have a look at the highlights from today's show. Mutharika's unlikely comeback after court defeat and fraud allegations in Malawi. Seychelles election pits Ramkalawan's recovery agenda against Herminie's challenge. Museveni cleared to contest Uganda presidency extending decades in power. Bobi Wine approved to challenge Museveni in Uganda's presidential race. Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa reshuffles Zanu-PF leadership, fueling succession speculation. And Kenyan engineer transforms invasive water hyacinth into green alternatives. DSTV 2 at 5, GOTV 25, Network Media Hub and NTV Africa is where you can find us, and primarily you can find us on oneup2.com, where if you do go to oneup2.com, that's ONEUPTWO, do click the echo icon and you can have a look at this episode again, as well as other NTV programs, because on NTV, oneup2.com, Echo Primetime is anytime. My name is Ashwin Betty. It's been a wonderful week of Africa. Good morning. Soraja Kanaka.